Hold on, we have to continue. Our Public Safety Committee meeting here today at SANDAG. Happy Friday. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all join me, please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. And thank you. Before we jump right into that meeting, I will ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum. Francesca, were you able to get off the phone with that council member? I'll give you that
Sorry
time.
about that, Chair. Yes, we do have a quorum.
Fabulous. So I'd like to remind the members and the public for our process for both member and public comments. The members, the committee members using their cameras, and we will take public comments, public live comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment and or question, and then I'll go ahead and recognize you. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak on an item, please use the raised hand icon in the Zoom toolbar and unmute yourself when you are called on. If you are calling into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone if you would like to comment on an item. Okay, with that, let's start with item number 1. It's approval of meeting minutes. If a member of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand now.
Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
Great. If there are any Public Safety Committee members that would like to comment on these items, please turn on your camera. Again, this is item 1, approval of meeting minutes. Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Chair, this is Moreno. Happy to make a motion.
Second, Sheriff Gore.
Member Moreno with a motion, seconded from Sheriff Gore. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Just a moment, actually. I wanted to clarify. I don't know who to ask about this. I apologize. I don't believe that Councilmember Moreno is a voting member of the committee anymore.
I'm happy to withdraw my motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion then, Sheriff Gore.
Sheriff Gore, and I will second it so we can move this process along. Not a problem.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
We now go to calling the roll.
All right. For the County Chiefs Sheriff's Association, Chief Galucci?
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo?
Abstain since this is my first meeting.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, oh, I apologize. I skipped the County Chiefs Association, Seat B. Chief K, are you on the line? I believe they're absent. For the County of San Diego, the County of San Diego is also absent. For the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, Chief Jorge Duran?
Yes.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Thank you. For the Regional Fire Emergency Medical Service, Chief Vogt?
Yes.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Blackburn, are you on the line? I believe he's absent. He was having some technical difficulties. For North County Inland, Councilmember Frank?
Yes.
Thank you. The San Diego Police Department is absent. For the San Diego County Sheriff, Sheriff Gore?
Yes.
Thank you. And for South County Chair Sotelo Solis?
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass with 1 abstention and those members present.
Great. We have item 2, which is public comment, public and member comment regarding any issues not on the agenda. I'd like to first welcome our new members of the Public Safety Committee, as this is their first meeting of 2020 and our first meeting of 2021. I keep saying 2020, but it's 2021, people. So the list of the new and primary and alternate members include Supervisor Nora Vargas, Councilmember Mike Donovan, Councilmember Raul Campillo, Councilmember Marnie Von Wilpert, Councilmember Jack Shu, Councilmember Christopher Rodriguez, Councilmember Ed Musgrove, Fire Chief Chris Brainerd, Under Sheriff Kelly Martinez, Chief Ed Varso, Interim Probation Chief Cesar Escudo, and Acting U.S. Attorney Randy Grossman, and MTS Chief Al Steyler. So, bienvenidos, welcome, congratulations, yay! If a member of the public would like to comment, please raise your hand.
Chair, we don't have any hands from the public.
Seeing none, we will move on to Public Safety Committee members who would like to offer any comments, again, of anything that is not on the agenda today. Seeing none, we will move into item 3. It's the Executive Director's Report, and I believe Jen Lithicum is going to be providing the update for today.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair. So let's start with the Del Mar Bluffs. You've likely heard that the Bluffs recently experienced a very serious collapse after a thorough review was conducted by North County Transit District. Operations on the track reopened under a slow order. Last weekend, the tracks were closed to stabilize the bluff in this area, and along with other work on other areas like Mid-Coast and Encinitas also. Rail closures will take place again this weekend to continue the work, and we're preparing the site for an extensive structural repair that will happen over the next month. Del Mar, the Bluffs is a 1.7 mile long stretch of the Low Sand Corridor, which is the second busiest intercity rail corridor in the nation. And so our best option is to move those tracks permanently off the bluff. Let's move on to the regional plan. At last week's Board of Directors meeting, we took a deep dive into the assumptions, data, and strategies we are evaluating for
Oh my God,
If
this transformative 2021 plan.
I could, Jim, I just want to remind all of our members to make sure that you are muted and that we, if you are interested in speaking, you'll go ahead and turn your camera on. But I just want to remind us all, keep ourselves muted. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. So back to the regional plan, the team has been poring over data, and a panel of SANDAG data experts shared with the board our cutting edge approach to transportation modeling and data analysis. To put this in perspective, the regional plan is being developed uses 250 terabytes of data, which is more than 20 times all the data it would take to store all the printed books in the Library of Congress. Last week's board meeting also featured a panel of independent experts who discussed pricing and funding strategies that have been considered and adopted throughout the nation. We wrapped up the meeting with a presentation that broke down the cost estimates and laid out a funding strategy that will make the regional plan a reality. Our next regional plan presentation to the Board of Directors is on April 9th, and that one will focus on technology in the plan and how our next operating system works. Okay, switching gears to money. We have a great finance team. They continue their work to help keep our critical regional projects moving forward. Last week, we issued nearly $266 million in refunding and new issuance bonds, resulting in $130 million in project funds, and the most incredible of all, $22 million in present value savings. So that's savings on the interest we're going to have to pay. When these bond deals close, it will help it'll help support cash flow needs for the Transnet Major Corridor program of projects. Okay, COVID-19. It's been a year since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic and the stay-at-home order was issued for all of California. As we approach this milestone, our data and economics teams developed a year in review economic report. The report analyzes data from the past 12 months to provide insights into what recovery might look like for the San Diego region as the pandemic continues and the vaccines start to be distributed more widely. That was my mail being delivered. The Mid-Coast Trolley Project, it's nearing completion, and the 9 new stations on the UC San Diego Blue Line are shaping up. This summer, we're going to begin testing the trolleys, and we're still on track for commencing service this fall. And finally, as many of you are aware, Craig Carter assumed the role of the interim Argus director about a year ago, filling the vacancy we had when Pam Scanlon passed away. Craig stepped in to give us time to conduct an external recruitment for this important position to both SANDAG and the region. Craig's done a fantastic job steadying the ship and progressing the entire Argus program, and I want to thank him for everything he's done. This past winter, we started the recruitment process, and I'm pleased to announce that we currently have a final candidate that we hope to bring on board in the next few weeks that we will hopefully be able to introduce at your next PSC meeting. And that concludes my report. Chair Sotelo Solis, back to you.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Are there any comments from members of the public there, Ms. Clerk?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Seeing none, we'll now go to Public Safety Committee members. Anyone wishing to ask Jim any questions regarding the presentation he just gave? Seeing none, let's hop to the next item. Great job, team. We are hustling along here. It's a report from the Chiefs and Sheriff's Management Committee. Jeff Gallucci is presenting item number 4. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. And I did receive a text from Mayor Pro Tem Blackburn regarding the fact that he can watch the meeting, but he can't be heard. So if it's okay with the clerk, he asked if he could vote through me when we get to voting items. Is that okay?
I just want to confirm with the legal counsel. Sam, can you weigh in on that?
And that should be fine for now. I think if we could find out if he is in the other list, the attendees list, that would be great.
And just for everybody to know, I don't believe that there are any more action items today. It was just the minutes, so.
Oh, perfect then, we're good.
Yeah, and I know that in the past, we've texted the clerk as well directly. So she has the ability to just monitor it, but I'm glad we don't have any action items. So I think we're in the clear. Chief,
Okay,
you're up.
solved the problem. On to my report. The Chiefs and Sheriff's Management Committee held a meeting on Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. The Management Committee reviewed and approved the FY 2021 Argus Annual Work Plan. Staff from Argus and Criminal Justice Research Division provided an overview of significant accomplishments from the calendar year 2020 and a preview of upcoming activities aimed at informing and assisting public safety partners in the region in 2021. These presentations will also be given today at this meeting. The next Management Committee meeting is Wednesday, April 7, 2021 at 9:45 a.m. And that concludes my report.
Fabulous. Are there any comments from members of the public there, Ms. Clerk?
No, Chair, we don't have any hands from the public.
Seeing none, are there any comments from members of the PSC committee? Seeing none, let's, again, this was for information only. We now move on to item 5. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We go to item 5, which is a report from the San Diego County Fire Chiefs Association. Chief Voigt is presenting item 5. You're up.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Just a few highlights of the last San Diego County Fire Chiefs meeting. We nominated 2 individuals to fill a newly formed seat on the Integrated Regional Water Management Advisory Board, and that is a water wildfire nexus seat. And they help distribute grant funds that comes through the water side. And we are very excited to have a seat on and in that role. The next item to report on is the vaccination process in the county utilizing the fire department's 2 major groups, the metro agencies, San Diego City and surrounding departments, and Operation Collaboration, which is the rest of the county, including all of the other local government firefighters. Since January, when we began vaccinating firefighters, emergency medical services, frontline workers, long-term care facility residents, and agricultural workers, also emergency workers and members of the public. So far, as of this morning, over 87,000 doses have been provided through these activities. And the last thing I'm going to report on is we had a discussion at the Chiefs level about having a greater participation and involvement in this committee. And I've requested to have a few presentations agendized, and just as a preview, hopefully we're going to soon have a presentation on the upcoming fire season, the outlook and preparation. Also, a more extensive report on the vaccination process in 2021 21 of all the fire departments, including outcomes and lessons learned. A presentation on the next generation RECIP, Regional CAD-to-CAD Interoperability Project, which is underway as we speak. And this will actually be part 2 of a presentation that was done 7 years ago on the first generation RECIP. And then lastly, the Intera Regional Geospatial Database Project and how it's transitioned, and some exciting tools that fire department and public safety incident commanders will have at their fingertips coming up. So again, some items that will be agendized in the future. And next meeting will be April 1st, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you so much, Chief. Are there any comments from members of the public?
No, Chair, there are no hands from the public.
Are there any comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, this was for information only. We are now moving on to item 6. Thank you so much. And today we have presentations by Ms. Sandy Keaton first, and then followed by Katie Muggs. So, or Katie Mugg, not Muggs. I pluralized it, but here we go. Item 6.
Great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. It's my pleasure actually to have the opportunity to see you today and present on the 2020 criminal justice research accomplishments. As you all know, 2020 is a year like no other, and we, as you, pivoted during 2020 to include needed information on COVID, and also changed how we did our meetings as well. And so I'm hoping you could see our flexibility as I go through these slides. Next, please. The Clearinghouse was initiated as a pilot program in 1977. After the pilot program ended in the mid-1990s, the San Diego Board of Directors continued funding the Clearinghouse through member agency assessments, and also from all the regional cities and counties. Over time, the primary functions of the Criminal Justice Research Division has evolved to include compiling the crime and arrest trends, serving as a resource for information about crime and justice for member agencies and other provider agencies, justice and social services, conducting independent and objective assessments, and providing staff support to the PSC committee. While we have been here for over 4 decades, our core missions and areas of focus have remained the same. However, we continue to evolve to keep current and meet the needs of the community, as well as incorporate best practices in both research and how we present our data. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Thank you. CJ staff have been the primary lead on staffing the PSC since it was formed in 2003. When the pandemic hit, we had 1 live meeting, and then we went on to transition to virtual meetings and held 6 additional meetings during 2020. In addition to presenting information in May about how COVID may affect public safety, we also had a number of topics from our PSC members and partners in the region. This included how the county was handling significant changes that resulted from the drug Medi-Cal changes, regional law enforcement de-escalation policy, an overview of probation in August that was requested by Chair Solita Solis, and which she was vice chair, and an overview of MTS changes as they relate to fair evasion and also public safety issues. Next, please. Our CJ staff is also committed to providing very timely information in easy to read formats. 2 publications that weren't planned as part of our work program, but we completed, included one info bit on how COVID may impact public safety, which was shared in May, and included some preliminary crime statistics. We also then did a deeper dive in July to look at how mental health calls for services had changed over the year to date. Next slide, please. In another report that was published in September, we worked with local CBOs to analyze data that they had collected through their clients and participants that access them for services. Many of these individuals and families were already struggling financially and had been impacted disproportionately by COVID. And the implications of this was that we helped provide, summarize this data so that then they had information that they could share not only with their community, but also as a resource to draw down and leverage additional funds. Slide 7. Next slide, please. Because of our national and local ties and analysis and distribution of regional information, our team is often asked to serve on task forces, including the Meth Strike Force, the Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force, Project Safe Neighborhood, and several juvenile program task forces. These include the San Diego County's Juvenile Justice Reduction of Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee, the Juvenile Justice System Improvement Leadership Committee, and the Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention. Right here, you're seeing our own Dr. Burke sharing information in a 2020 Meth Strike Force press conference with regional and federal partners about SANDAG's data that was part of the report card tracking meth use in the region. Next, please. In 2020, we published 2 crime reports, our annual 2019 data and our mid-year report with data from January through June. In addition, we also disseminated CJ flashes. Our CJ flashes go out 12 times a year during the year and are shorter versions of very timely data that are presented with using a lot of infographics. Next slide, please. In addition to our biannual crime report, we also publish an annual arrest report. These data are important because it has allowed for analysis of the justice system's response to crime, an analysis of adult and juvenile arrests, and tracking of arrests for a greater number of crimes than just the regular UCR. So these include weapons, drug offenses, identity theft. This slide highlights our arrest data for Carlsbad. However, more importantly, it showcases how we pivoted and began to supplement our larger reports with one-page analysis for each jurisdiction so they can have their data readily available, but also compare it to the region. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the data from a report we do every other year that looks at both victim and suspect characteristics and supplements our other crime reports. We wanted to show you this page in particular because it highlights some of the additional analysis we did to show that female victims of homicide are often older, white, and have a motive related to domestic violence. There's been a lot of speculation with how domestic violence numbers have changed during COVID, and our preliminary look at the 2020 crime stats show a large jump in homicide. So we will be delving into that data more on the motives for our next crime report. The analysis also showed how African Americans and Hispanic individuals were more likely to be victims of violent crimes compared to their representation in the population. Next, please. Another annual report from our clearinghouse is the Public Safety Expenditure Report for all local public safety functions, which actually my colleague Caroline will be presenting later in the meeting. This was a CJ flash that we produced in 2020 with the data from the FY 2018 and 2019 budget that showed that about $690 was spent on public safety per resident in our region. It also notes how these dollars were allocated across functions, what percent of different jurisdiction budgets went to law enforcement, and the sworn officer per 1,000 ratio. This report is important because we do a lot of work with the jurisdictions to ensure we are comparing apples to apples. And it was a report that would not otherwise be available, nor would it be available without our partnership and our support that we get from you and your crime analysts. Next slide, please. The 3 next slides highlight some of the CJ flashes that we produced in 2020. And again, I'm sharing them to highlight how we are trying to combine both local data with national statistics as they relate to key trends. In 2020, this included looking at opioid abuse and overdoses, which is something that unfortunately has gone up significantly. And it also, there has been the increased intertwining of fentanyl and opioid use and overdoses. Next, please. This CJ flash focused on the use of marijuana by arrestees, data which are compiled as part of the substance abuse monitoring program. This is an issue in part because of driving under the influence. It also actually showed how many individuals continue to buy marijuana on the streets in addition to the dispensaries. Next, please. Finally, we know from our population forecast that the largest growing proportion of the population are individuals 65 and older. And when COVID began, there was discussion of this population being at greater risk for COVID-related scams. This CJ Flash noted how individuals over 60 comprise 9 out of 10 embezzlement victims, but only 19% of the population. So this data, along with information from the DA and the Health and Human Service Agency about their efforts to partner on a Don't Get Hooked campaign to alert the public of these possible scams, was included in this CJ Flash. Next, please. So turning to our evaluation projects, in addition to the clearinghouse work that we do, and I just described, about 80% of our work revolves around actual evaluations. These evaluations are generated from either grants we write or are asked to partner in. And we often do process evaluations to document how the program was implemented, as well as outcome evaluations to determine to what effect the program had. All of our staff have gone through extensive law enforcement background checks through the Sheriff's Department, and we are committed to doing action research, which basically is research that provides very timely information, meeting constantly with our program providers so that they can then make any mid-course adjustments using the data that we are providing them. Next, please. In 2020, we had about 15 different evaluation projects going. The next few slides want to highlight 5 of those projects. The first slide shows our 2-year report that was submitted to the state for our evaluation of Prop 47 funded programs. As all of you probably know, Prop 47 was a voter initiative which reduced a number of property and drug offenses from felonies to misdemeanors, and then redirected that money towards treatment and was supposed to come back to the county. San Diego County, in partnership with the city, was selected through a competitive process and was the top applicant, receiving $6 million to implement and expand 3 programs around the region for individuals who had justice system contact because of a Prop 47 offense. We work closely with our partners and continue to work closely with our partners to document the characteristics of the individuals served, their needs, and referrals received, and how they completed the program. What we're finding out actually is that this is an older population between their 40s and 50s and 60s. They have multiple needs, often 7 to 8 needs at intake. And they've been using substances for around 2 decades. And finally, that housing is actually a very critical need for them. We are currently working on the final analysis of this report, and it'll be completed towards the end of the year. Next slide, please. This project was part of our ongoing work with the juvenile justice leadership, looking at juvenile justice programs and their effectiveness. The study took a closer look at probation's drug court and the long-term outcomes of the population. For this effort, we conducted an outcome evaluation examining the participants' characteristics, the services they actually received, and then long-term outcome recidivism data of both 6 and 12 months post-participation. Based on this report, the decision was made to discontinue the funding, reallocate resources to other programs that work to keep children and youth in their community and receive services there. Next slide, please. A few projects near and dear to my heart is our partnership with SBCS, which used to be South Bay Community Services, on their implementation of 2 Promise Neighborhood initiatives. The Chula Vista one, which is a catchment area in Chula Vista, and then the most recent one is the San Diego Promise Neighborhood, which includes Barrio Logan and also San Isidro area. These are federal initiatives to These are federal initiatives to reinvigorate neighborhoods through work with promotores, and is focused on improving outcomes from cradle to all the way to career. This infographic was actually created by SBCS, and we wanted to highlight this project because it shows how we work very closely with our community-based organizations, as well as national researchers, and the variety of methods we have brought to the table, including needs assessments to support the initial grant application, and then continue the evaluation once the funds are secured. Next, please. In 2020, we worked with North County Lifeline on actually 3 different grant projects looking at human trafficking. This was the first time their programs actually had ever conducted any type of evaluation or documented formally the individuals that they serve. We wanted to highlight this project because here it shows us using new systems and graphics to share research results. And it also was a way to support a local program and helping them tell their story to not only our community, but also up into the state. Next, please. The fifth and final project I want to highlight is the research we are currently doing with HIDA, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas Group, that included a formative process to identify key questions related to drugs and crimes and its impact in our community. And we conducted this research. Originally, we were planning to have focus groups in person, but had to pivot, and so we did them by Zoom, conducting 4 focus groups with both law enforcement and DA representatives. We actually received some very interesting information, and we're going to be using that information that we gained to now move on to the outcome evaluation, formulating those questions, and then moving that project forward through 2021. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so in closing, looking forward to now this year, 2021, staff will continue to coordinate the PSC. We'll be looking for additional measures of crime and transitioning to NIBRS, which is the National Incident-Based Reporting System. This is a new system that all law enforcement were reporting data into now, which is more extensive than what's currently happening with UCR and Part 1 crimes. We'll continue our work on current and new evaluations. We'll seek funding to support the public safety and quality of life interest of our region, and will ensure that all our data and research is unbiased and inclusive, consistent with the equity statement the SANDAG board recently adopted. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm open for questions if needed.
Are there any questions from members of the public on this item? I know we have part 1 completed. Thank you, Sandy.
No, Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, I think we will go to part 2. Katie, you're up.
Mayor, I'm not sure, Councilmember Campillo, is your hand up? Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
Thank you.
Chair, just
No problem.
appreciate it. Just wanted to say thank you for the presentation to the staff here on ARGIS and the criminal justice research accomplishments. Before I was elected to the city council, I was a prosecutor in the city attorney's office. And so I know how important this research and updating all the safety tools. I used ARGIS in my job regularly, all the databases. So I know that this is really important to providing public safety to our citizens here in our region. And just wanted to quickly say I'm really glad of all the accomplishments we were able to show here, and you can further expect support from either me, from my office specifically, from the city of San Diego. Please don't be hesitant to reach out if there's anything we can do for you, and I bring that passion for criminal justice on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great to have, you know, the diversity and perspectives and also to experiences. It's great there, Mr. Campillo, to offer that to staff, and just know that when we offer it, they will take you up on the offer. So
I know. I'm happy.
Good. All right. Thank you there, Council Member. Thank you, Sandy. Okay. Any other hands raised? Mr. Leiva, I see your camera on. Any questions? No? Okay. He said, no, ma'am. I read lips too. So I saw that as part of this committee, you also get that skill too. Okay, we now move on to part 2. Katie, you're up.
Well, that was a wonderful intro to ARGIS. So thank you for the previous feedback, and thank you committee members for being here today. I'm really proud to be able to represent ARGIS for this presentation, because we have had a really challenging year, as everybody else has, but we have continued to maintain 365, 24/7 support for the region during this critical year. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of what ARGIS is for the new committee members. We're actually a joint powers agency that was established in 1980 as a result of a grant to the San Diego Police Department. And we're essentially considered the hub for information sharing in the San Diego region. We receive data from our contributing member agencies and share this data with 60 other participating member agencies. And the data I'm referring to includes crime cases, arrests, citations, etc. In addition to that, we also provide a secure network to allow agencies to share this information, and we develop applications for our 4,900 on average law enforcement personnel to access the data that we store. Next slide, please. So we couldn't do this again without our governance structure. We rely heavily on our committees. Chief Sheriff's Management Committee, the Business Working Group really guide our data decisions, our business rules, and our day-to-day operations. We have this committee that provides support as well, and of course, the SANDAG Board of Directors. Next slide, please. So just a high level overview of our accomplishments, and I'll delve into each of these a little bit more. In Sandy's previous presentation, she mentioned NIBRS. This was a huge effort for ARGIS, and I will go into that in a few slides. We also kicked off the transition to CYBRS. I'm sorry for these acronyms. I did not make them up. We received over $1 million in grant funding. Thank you to the PSC and the SANDAG Board of Directors for the support in that. And with that grant funding, we were able to develop new desktop and mobile applications. We also seamlessly transitioned to a virtual environment and went through the process of having a new director. Next slide, please. So who used ARGIS this year? Next, please. The data contributing agencies, these are the agencies that contribute the data to ARGIS. We have increased these agencies last year, adding the district attorney and probation, and this year adding San Diego State. Next slide, please. We then share the data, that the agencies in the previous slide provide to all of these agencies. So you can see we have a diverse public safety bunch of agencies in our region, ranging from military to schools to United States pre-trial. So we really, every time we think that we've got all of the public safety agencies, we have another join. Next slide, please. So again, a major accomplishment this year was the approval of San Diego State to become a data contributing agency. Since that time, I believe they've contributed about 500 records, which have been shared or are accessible by all of the agencies that were in the previous slide. This year, at the end of 2020, we had 4,784 users. This fluctuates daily based on transfers, new hires, people leaving, etc. We also initiated an assessment of the contributing agencies and their role kind of in our governance, because we have had 5 requests for additional agencies to contribute data. So that will be something we'll be continuing next year. Is to kind of assess their role and like overall contributions to ARGIS. Next, please. So data sharing, what type of information am I talking about and how much? Next slide, please. First of all, I'd like to highlight, how do we do this? How does all of this information get to ARGIS, and how are we able to share it? So our little team of 18 maintains 50 different interfaces. So these interfaces are to and from the state, to local agencies, etc. And they are in real time, and we are able to get immediate notification if a record doesn't pass through them or if one of the interfaces is down. And last year we had very few issues, which I'm happy to report. The other important thing to note about ARGIS is that we do all of the standardization and validation for this data. So I have an example where, and this is just an example, Coronado, El Cajon, and the DA all enter a different type of, different abbreviations for a Black Camry, BLK, CAM, District Attorney, BLAK, CAMI. What ARGIS does in milliseconds is translate this and standardize it to Black Camry so that this data can be shared. And that's how our region is really unique, because El Cajon and Vista and San Diego PD are all able to access the data because of this standardization. And an example of this is we have 38 validation fields for vehicle color that we maintain. And then the vehicle model had to pass through 1,800 different validation fields, and that happens within seconds. Next slide, please. So how much data was shared this year? We ingested, and this is just our incident data. We do ingest other sources of data, but this is the primary bulk of what the ARGIS data warehouse is comprised of. It was 1.285 million, a little bit, 187,000 or so less than previous years. I don't know, maybe due to the pandemic, I can't really speak to why. Next slide, please. And to break it down so that you kind of get a feel for the types of data that I'm talking about. Supervision, that's probation data. We get traffic accidents, we get arrests and detentions, citations, we get CAD 911 calls from 4 different agencies. So this is the type of data that the agencies are sending, we're standardizing, and then providing access to for all of our members. Next, please. Okay, so this was our biggest data accomplishment, and I will go quickly for the sake of brevity, but it is confusing. NIBRS was a requirement this year by the FBI and by Cal DOJ. That's the CYBERS program. But essentially, it's going to change the dynamic of how we report crimes at the state, local, and national level. So the left side is how we've been doing uniform crime reporting since the 1920s. It's called summary reporting, and we do monthly reports now for the FBI. We have transitioned this to daily, real-time activities going to the FBI. We are averaging 1,000 a day. The offense classifications such as homicide and rape and robbery, we only reported on 10 before. We're going to be reporting on 52 now. This includes new crimes such as white collar and other areas that we weren't required to report nationally previously. We did follow a hierarchy before, and this is not just ARGIS, this is nationally, where we were required to report the highest charge level. So if there was a rape and a homicide and a larceny, the homicide would be reported. Now we will be reporting on each of these crimes, up to 10 for every incident. Finally, the data fields that are going to be required that we're sending increased from 6, such as name, date of birth, to 58, so that we can really begin to dig into the data by adding information such as weapons, relationships, motives. So what this is going to do is really provide a breadth of information and statistics for the nation and for our region. I'm happy to report that we were the first region in California to implement NIBRS. So kudos to our team for accomplishing that, and to the agencies. We could not have done this without the jurisdictions. They provided so much support and input for us to be able to do this. Next, please. So we received the certification, which was very exciting on behalf of the FBI. I did a cost savings analysis on this, and we found that we saved about 6 full-time bodies across the region by handling this as ARGIS, as a regional entity. And that included the testing. It was 6 months of testing, and we worked with the agencies closely. As you can see, this is very high numbers of records being accepted by the FBI. Since the end of 2020, this has gone up to a 99%. So I know our agencies recognize this. If you can see from the quote, they called us superheroes. So I'm excited to be able to call myself a superhero. Just need to pick which one. Next slide, please. Network and infrastructure. So how do we do all of this? How do the interfaces work? How does technically the data really get to us? Next, please. We actually provide a private, secure network that allows all of the agencies, the 70 plus on average that we have a year, to connect to Argus for the local data. We also provide the network to get to the sheriff's department for their systems, such as their jail information management system. And one thing that I don't think a lot of folks are aware of is that we actually provide the connection to Cal DOJ, so that we have access to the state and national wants and warrants, so that when somebody's pulling somebody over on the side of the road, they're using the Argus network to get to those warrants, and to all the other information that we're capable of sharing through this network. Next. This year, a major accomplishment for our network was we wanted to see how safe we were. With all of the cyber attacks that are happening and the ransomware attacks, we wanted to do our due diligence to make sure that our environment was as secure as it could be. So we worked with our data center host, who's also the FBI backup data center provider, and they penetrated our network. They did a bunch of vulnerability tests, and we had some enhancements that were recommended from that I'm proud to say we've implemented. So we're still working on a few of our virtual environment recommendations. And what's nice about this is that in 6 months, again, our partner agency is going to come back and do the same test to make sure that the fixes that we did are actually all good and that we're as secure as we can be. Next slide, please. So in addition to the network and all of the interfaces, how do we maintain this? We have, with our staff again of 18, 24/7, 365 help desk that we maintain just with our staff. And we get calls in the middle of the night, but our team handles them. We responded and resolved 640 help desk tickets last year. We also want to be as transparent as possible. So we send weekly service logs on Fridays, actually one just about to go out now, to all of the agencies to indicate the help desk tickets that we closed or opened, any maintenance that we're going to be doing, and the deployments that we will be doing the following week. We do deployments, which are enhancements or bug fixes to our applications, two times a month. And it's so nice to be able to have in-house support to be able to do this, so that we don't have to go through a vendor and a change management system. We can implement changes on the fly with our internal technical staff. Next slide, please. So applications, how do our 4,700 or so users access Argus? Next, please. We provide a suite of tools because there is no one tool for law enforcement personnel. You have crime analysts and you have patrol officers, which would rely probably sometimes on different tools. Next, please. So we provide a suite of tools, and this is all accessible through the Argus portal. We had over 2.2 million visits to the portal last year, and an average daily of over 6,000 with 365 unique people, or Argus customers, visiting the site to access over 15 applications that we maintain. Next, please. So I'll just briefly go over this. Surfers and CopLink are our two primarily used applications. Surfers is our tactical analysis tool. CopLink is our investigative tool. We had over 500,000 queries into these systems last year. We also, the Cognos, which is in the lower part of the slide in the middle, we saw about a 30% increase in Cognos reporting this year due to NIBRs and people testing and trying to get familiar, because Cognos allows staff to quickly generate reports for council members or for their captains. If you wanted to say, show me all the traffic accidents that happened here on a day with a red car, they're able to do that through the Cognos reporting. Next slide, please. So our major accomplishments for our applications, we rewrote Surfers, which is our in-house application. We rewrote it, and with enhanced functionality, our software programmers did an excellent job. We received great feedback on this. And then we also, for one of our off-the-shelf products, we were approved to transition to the cloud, which is going to allow us to share information and access information with Las Vegas, with Arizona, and they've upgraded this so that there will be kind of a Google type search the application allows for. And we'll probably be bringing this back to the agency, to the committee to show you what we can, because it is law enforcement sensitive, but to give you a better idea about what these applications entail. Next slide, please. We have a Be on the Lookout program. This allows users to send emails quickly and obtain information on the fly about be on the lookout serious crimes that if you need to get something out quickly. We had 1,600 more subscribers this year than last year. Next, please. So Argus Mobile, if you've been on this committee or around Argus for long enough, you know that we have a robust mobile program. We were the first in the nation, actually in 2004, to implement a mobile program for law enforcement. Currently, we support 1,100 devices, over 10 applications. This year, we had 330,000 queries to our Surfers mobile application, which is the same as our desktop applications, that officers are used to the application, whether it be a desktop or a mobile application. We also support agencies for their mobile computers in their car, and we initiated a smartwatch pilot this year, which we'll be reporting back on to this committee later on this year. We anticipate doing a big Argus mobile presentation. Next, please. So this year, I'm excited about this one. We received grant funding to develop an e-citation app. And so this will essentially replace the tickets that officers write, which then go to the station, and a data entry person needs to translate their handwriting and then manually data enter the data into their records management systems for the courts and to come to Argus. We have developed a slick application that pre-populates locations, and that is very quick and smooth. And we've developed the app itself. Next year, we'll be working on the interface directly to the courts and to the agencies. We'll begin testing also with Coronado and Escondido and Oceanside. I think actually we already have. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one for the sake of brevity. Next, please. So we think it's really important to make sure that everybody's can get trained on our applications, and we successfully transitioned from in-person trainings to virtual trainings. And we were able to train 200 people this year and held 34 classes. Next, please. So for the public, we do provide several tools for the public, and we will be in the future really enhancing what's available because of the NIBRS project I spoke about. But this year, through www.argus.org, we had 160,000 page views. We have 2 applications that are valuable through www.argus.org. One is crime statistics. It's a pretty rudimentary breakdown of crimes in the region during certain time frames. And again, we are going to build a very robust and great application next year due to NIBRS with all of those variables that we'll be reporting on that I spoke about. Crimemapping.com, you may be aware of this application. You can register to receive up to 3 different, you can put in 3 different locations, and receive daily emails on regarding if there was a crime around the area that you selected to be informed on. I get them. It's nice to know what's going on in my neighborhood. Next, please. Finally, the graffiti tracker application. We've maintained this program for about, I want to say 7 years now. Essentially, it allows citizens and law enforcement to report on graffiti. And we had about 70,000 uploads this year. And what's nice about, we do this with a lot of our products actually, is we provide monthly metrics reports to the different agencies to let them know where's the graffiti happening in your neighborhood. Next slide, please. So a big thank you to the committees. We couldn't do this without all of the support from all of the committees we have. The approval of San Diego State University by this committee was very valuable. Also, this committee and the board of directors supported us for 7 grant proposals, which we need all the support we can get during this time. So I'm very grateful for that. You all approved the budget. The business working group worked diligently on the NIBRS rules and responding to the data and public records requests we get. Next slide, please. So next year, ARGIS develops an annual work plan that is vetted by the chiefs and the business working group. And we throw out a bunch of projects and then our committees rank them. So high on the priority list next year is the NIBRS communication plan, because statistics are going to change across the region and we need to notify and inform the public about this. Also, a crime statistics application rewrite. That's going to be a significant undertaking. The court citation I mentioned, and we will be implementing a new mapping application. Finally, we will be continuing to enhance our new our existing mobile program, and continuing to just make sure that our network is secure as it can be to prevent any cyber breaches and safeguard your jurisdiction's data. Next. So I want to just give a special shout out to my staff, to our staff, to the ARGIS team. We lost our boss during the first week of the 2020. And thanks to Craig so much for stepping in. And we will see who comes on board next. But I'm so proud of us because we stuck together and we were able to achieve so many big accomplishments, NIBRS and the system rewrites. And I would be remiss if I didn't call out the team for all of this. So that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Well, Katie, our heartfelt thanks. Your team worked extremely hard. And again, when you have a loss of a team leader, somebody who literally lived and breathed ARGIS, kind of birthed the program,
Yes.
definitely has that heartfelt touch. So thank you and the entire team for all of your work. So,
thank you.
So Mr. Campillo, I see your camera up. No, any questions? Mr. Leyva, any questions?
Like you, I really appreciate, all the work. A lot of people don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And so when we get these sorts of presentations, there's certainly a deeper sense of appreciation on everybody's part. I think we know in our heart of hearts that nothing ever goes wrong. So somebody's doing something right, but at the same time, it gives us a chance to say thank you. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from members of the dais, our virtual dais here? Miss Clerk, do we have any members of the public? And Mr. Craig, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with this amazing group and having the faith in me to pull that off. they are an amazing group and they've done a great job next year, and I know they'll take us into the future. So I just want to say thank you as well.
Great. Okay. All right. I see Caroline, did you want to say a few words or share anything? No? Okay. Great. Ms. Clerk, do we have any members of the public wishing to address us on this item?
No, Chair, no public comments.
Okay. Any last chances from our members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much. And again, thank you to Katie and to Sandy for your work and continued diligence on these items. We now move on to item 7, which is the public safety expenditures for fiscal year 2019-2020 in San Diego County. Caroline, you are up, and this is for information only. Go ahead, Caroline.
Great. So good afternoon, Chairwoman Sotelo-Solis and members of the PSC. My name is Caroline Stevens, and I'm a Senior Research Analyst with the Criminal Justice Research Division here at SANDAG. Today, I want to provide you with a brief overview of our most recent publication, Public Safety Allocations in the San Diego Region, which was just released to the public yesterday. And this regional summary of public safety budgeting information is exclusively available here. And the purpose of this research is to explore 1, 5, and 10-year fluctuations in public safety expenditures and staffing throughout the San Diego region. Over the past 6 months, we have worked diligently with each agency to ensure that we are comparing apples to apples or the same categories of expenditures across agencies. And I want to take a moment to thank the staff that worked so diligently with us on this publication. It's a lot of work and we appreciate your time. So while this is not a particularly glamorous or groundbreaking publication, it is one of the most useful from the feedback that we receive from our partners. They refer to it all throughout the year. So, and lastly, just before I get started, I want to actually note that to reduce the impact of inflation on comparisons over time, data have been adjusted to reflect FY 19-20 fiscal year dollars, and that this data only reflects expenditures through June 30th, 2020. With that out of the way, let's dive in and look at some regional trends. So next slide. So this chart shows the 10-year trend for public safety expenditures for the San Diego region. Public safety agencies across the region spent $244 billion in FY 19-20, and this is the third consecutive increase since FY 16-17. Public safety expenditures were 5% higher than 1 year ago, 10% higher than 5 years ago, and 14% higher than 10 years ago. And it is typical for expenditures of this nature to increase annually, and a fair amount of this rise in expenditures can be attributed to population growth. In 2010, San Diego had a population of roughly 3 million people, and by 2019, that population had risen to 3.3 million. And another notable change that occurred in 2011 was the implementation of AB 109, the Public Safety Realignment Act, when local public safety agencies received thousands of additional offenders from state corrections facilities, and San Diego County became responsible for housing, supervising, and rehabilitating this new population of offenders. Next slide, please. So this chart shows the breakdown of how public safety dollars were allocated across 7 different categories of expenditures. The big takeaway here is that 1 in every $2 public safety dollars was spent on law enforcement in the region, with corrections and courts being the second and third largest spending categories. When we look at overall expenditures per San Diego residents, this includes children and adults, it comes out to about $721 per resident in FY 19-20. And in FY 18-19, expenditures per San Diego resident came out to roughly $690 per person, so we did see a slight increase there. Next slide, please. So we also just wanted to take a look at how changes in staffing related to changes in expenditures and understand if these two metrics trend consistently with one another. This graph shows 1 year percent change fluctuations in expenditures and staffing across all public safety categories. As you can see, almost every category increased their spending or stayed consistent. Corrections decreased by less than 1%. However, only 4 categories increased staffing. 1 stayed the same, and 2 actually exhibited a slight decrease in their staffing. Reasons for expenditures increasing varied across categories, but agencies either expanded programs or enhanced existing programs or increased benefits due to negotiated labor agreements last year. Next slide, please. So we just wanted to drill down on each of the separate categories and explain a little bit about the offices within those categories. So the prosecution category is comprised of the district attorney's office and the city attorney's office. And in FY 1920, they spent about $209 million. Over the past year, DA expenditures increased by 2% due to expansion of the cold case program, the trial services program, and the regional victim services center. Meanwhile, the city attorney's expenditures decreased by about 3%. Next, the court-related services category, which includes the Superior Court, the Sheriff's Court Services, and the Grand Jury. Superior Court is one of the state's 58 trial courts and handles all local judicial matters. It's important to note here that judges' salaries are not included in this publication as they are paid by the state, so we didn't cover those because it's not local funding. The Sheriff's Court Services Bureau staff provides weapons screening, court facility security, and also executes, serves, and returns all writs and warrants. And the Grand Jury is a group of citizens who investigate civil matters and issue criminal indictments. So in FY 1920, these three offices spent around $271 million combined. About 70% of this went towards the Superior Court. And over the past year, the Superior Court and Sheriff's Court budget increased by 3% and 4% respectively, while the Grand Jury budget actually decreased by 26% as the pandemic forced them to cease all of their activities and operations temporarily. Next slide, please. So the public defense category includes the Public Defender's Office, which spent a total of $89 million in FY 1920. The county's public defense system is managed by the Department of the Public Defender, which is comprised of 4 independent and ethically walled law offices: the primary public defender, the alternate public defender, the multiple conflicts office, and the Office of Assigned Counsel, which are designed to handle various conflicts of interest for one another. The public defense expenditures increased by about 6% in the past fiscal year. And this increase is a result of growing labor costs and increased case responsibilities as a result of several legislative changes, as well as the expansion of the Collaborative Courts Program, the Fresh Start Program, and the Defense Transition Unit. All of these programs work towards the successful rehabilitation and judicial supervision of clients and their successful reintegration into society after engaging with the legal system. Next, I want to talk about the correctional facilities category, which includes spending related to adult correctional institutions operated by the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, juvenile facilities managed by the Probation Department, institutional services provided by probation, and the Chula Vista City Jail, which houses inmates apprehended by the U.S. Marshals. In FY 1920, about $454 million was spent on corrections, and the total expenditures for this category decreased by a little less than 1% in the past fiscal year. Probation's juvenile facilities expenditures decreased by 15% last year, which reflects their greater focus on alternatives to detention. And the Sheriff's and Chula Vista Jail expenditures increased by 3% and 1% respectively. So probation spent about $143 million in FY 1920 for field services and administration. This is about an 8% increase from the last fiscal year. And this can be attributed to a shift of units in field services, as well as rising salaries and benefits costs due to negotiated labor agreements and required retirement contributions. Changes in juvenile corrections and field services staff is partially attributed to reduction of youth on probation supervision in line with national best practices. Also in FY 1920, spending for the other category of public safety totaled around $61 million and increased by about 1% since the last year. The 4 groups included in this category are the San Diego Public Safety Executive Office, which provides administrative oversight to 10 county public safety departments, the Child Support Services Department, which establishes and enforces child support orders and oversees the Bureau of Public Assistance Investigations, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, which receives and investigates complaints of misconduct by peace officers and custodial officers employed by the Sheriff's and Probation Department, and Oceanside Harbor Police. Next slide. We also just wanted to drill down a little bit on changes in expenditures by jurisdiction, and this is covered in much greater detail within the report and the appendices especially. This chart shows the percent change in expenditures over the past fiscal year, and so region-wide we saw expenditures change by about 8%. However, one-year changes varied across jurisdictions, as you can see, from 11% higher for Carlsbad, Chula Vista, and San Diego, all the way down to less than 1% for La Mesa. Next slide, please. So this slide actually covers the proportion of FY 1920 general funds allocated to law enforcement for the 9 incorporated cities that maintain their own police departments. As you can see, there was considerable variability across jurisdictions, from 24% in Carlsbad to 46% in National City and El Cajon. The regional municipal average for these 9 jurisdictions was 34%. Next slide. So this graph shows the number of budgeted sworn law enforcement officers per 1,000 in the population for FY 1920 by jurisdiction. This varied across jurisdictions, as you can see, ranging from 0.96 in Chula Vista all the way up to 1.9 in Coronado. Comparatively, the regional average for budgeted sworn officers per 1,000 residents in FY 1920 was 1.27, and this figure has remained roughly consistent over the past 5 years. The FY 1920 regional figure for San Diego County is less than half the 2019 regional average of 2.9 per 1,000 in the population. And this is actually really important to note here because San Diego is consistently ranked as one of the safer metros and cities in the nation, even though we have comparatively fewer officers on the street. Next slide, please. So this year we asked a few new questions just because 2020 was such a strange year and we wanted to document some of that. So first we asked them about COVID-19 and how this impacted their agencies and their funding. And the basic feedback that we got is that agencies redirected a lot of funds towards protective gear, towards staffing impacts. For example, if staff had to be out of the office to care for sick family members or had to work overtime because certain staff were out of the office sick. And then there was a great acknowledgement that funding in the future could be impacted, and they're concerned about this and kind of bracing for this in the future. We also asked questions about equity and public safety reform and some of the police demonstrations that went on this year. So there is a kind of overarching focus on racial and social equity programs and enhancing those programs for communities, and expanding de-escalation training among officers in the region and working with the community to strengthen trust. That was pretty common in some of the responses that we got back. As a part of this, and this is actually a question that we received in prior years, we asked about the overtime. So across the 11 agencies, there was a total of 96 million was budgeted for overtime expenses in FY 1920, but a total of 115 million was spent. It's a difference of about 19 million. So we did see that agencies are going somewhat over their overtime budgets in the last year. So that's kind of the brief preview that I have for you today. And with that, I'm just going to open the floor for questions, and thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I appreciate that holistic view of, again, all the things that have happened during COVID-19 and how we've really utilized this time to provide our staff and our team members the ability to get more training and a number of other resources that are so essential. So I do have a couple cameras on. So I have Mr. Leiva, you are up.
Thank you, Chair. Sotelo Solis, I appreciate the opportunity. It was a very good report. Just one thing I'll put on the radar for this group is passing of Bill 823, which is the closure of the State Division of Juvenile Justice and the realignment of the back to counties. And so as of July 1, 2021, we'll be prohibited as a county from sending wards to the Division of Juvenile Justice, which potentially could impact some of our in-custody numbers moving forward. So we are preparing and working collaboratively across really all disciplines to make sure that we're able to support those youth and, prioritizing, as we always have, keeping them closer to family and community, which is part of the purpose of this bill, and how we might support them as well from a lens of reducing and eliminating racial and ethnic disparities and keeping them from being transferred to the adult court. So just to give this group an idea, we currently have 55 youth there at DJJ as of January. In 2019, we sent 22 youth there. In 2020, we sent 24 youth there. And so we'll be anticipating more returns over time. But again, we have a plan and we are prepared to deal with that. That's all that I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruben. And you cut out at the very beginning, and I think you said AB 823?
That is correct, AB 823.
Great. Thank you so much for the heads up. Okay, seeing no additional hands raised. Again, this is all information that, again, is one provided to us as board members and committee members, but this is also, where is this located on our website or additional information that people can click on there, Caroline?
Chair, Steve Goebel has his hand up.
Hi, Steve. I
Hi.
cannot see you, but hi.
Hi, Chair. How are you?
I'm
Thank you.
good.
Thank you, Sheriff. As I was kind of looking through the last couple of slides, Caroline, there were the officers per thousand certainly is one helpful metric, and the percent of the budget is also very helpful. Together they tell a story of why any one of those agencies does what they do in terms of where they stand in terms of officers per thousand. If anybody's a fan of Paul Harvey, you know the rest of the story. There are some limitations of that. Officers per thousand could be a community's tax base, which funds the police department. Depending on the income tax or property tax base, that could have an effect on the budget's density, population per square mile. So I was beginning to ask, is there another metric similar to that we could start to look at? I started just with calls for service, but thank you to Dr. Burke and to Under Sheriff Martinez for kind of weighing in earlier this week on some information on that. There are some limitations even with calls for service. As I've understood and come to learn, a geographical area that you cover may impact calls for service. The types of calls, whether they're officer initiated or citizen initiated, the response times. So even that's not a perfect metric as well. But I guess I'm always looking for the next metric which tells the rest of the story. And if anybody has any comments of what those might be or helpful, I think that would certainly be helpful going forward. But thanks to the staff for answering some questions early. I think we're always in the mind, the public is saying, do we need more law enforcement officers for safety? And the other side of that is, do we need law enforcement officers for the safety of the officers as well? Rather than going out alone on a call, if they have resources themselves. So there's both sides to that. But thanks to staff for help clearing up some questions.
Thank you. Dr. Burke, did you want to take a stab at that one? Any other questions that you heard?
Yeah, no, so we were communicating, and we definitely always want to take advantage of the most up-to-date information we have, considering that there's variation across jurisdictions, for example, in the calls for service. And many times when we take data from a broader jurisdictional perspective, for example, the city of San Diego, there's so much variation within the city of San Diego. I was hoping, I see Chief Colucci has his camera on too, and I really would defer to law enforcement, and I know the Sheriff's Department shared their perspective, but give the chief a chance to speak if he would like to.
Great. Chief?
Sure, happy to do so. Everything that the council member talked about are good metrics. But remember, the problem with the population is that's just people that put their heads on a pillow at nighttime. If your city has a large influx of people for business or tourism or any other purpose during the daytime or nighttime, that impacts calls for service also. I will say that calls for service is a better metric than crime data specifically, because crime data depends on reporting, and that can vary for different reasons throughout jurisdictions. One of the things that we use in Carlsbad is officer saturation level. And what that means is everything from beginning of shift preparation to end of shift to lunchtime. And it includes vacation time for other officers, injury on duty for other officers. So what we look at is the amount of time an officer's day is encumbered with business or calls for service. And once that number reaches a certain threshold, that officer is no longer doing proactive police work in any way, shape, or form because they've reached their max saturation level for being able to do any other work besides calls for service. So that's another type of metric that's used for looking at whether or not you're adequately staffed. Because remember, when you talk about officers per thousand, that doesn't take into account, again, officers who may be off for injury, vacation, training, comp time off. There's a myriad of reasons that officers may or may not be at work. And when we're reporting the number of officers that we have, that's the number of sworn staff that an agency may have. Now, does that include the allotted positions? So let's say you have 200 positions for police officers, but you only really have 170 of those positions filled. You're down 30. And then of that 170, how many of those people are actually available to do work? So it's a tough metric to come to a specific conclusion on, but I would recommend there are companies out there that do studies for officer saturation level, and that's a very helpful metric also.
Thank you, Chief. I hope that helped to clarify there, council member. Great. I see some head nods. Okay, seeing no additional questions, I think, and Mr. Gallucci, I actually had I saw your camera on. Did you have an additional comment that you want to make outside of addressing Mr. Councilmember Goebel's question?
No, ma'am. I just was getting ready to answer the question.
Fabulous. All right. Well, thank you, Caroline. We really appreciate the presentation. Thank you for the update. And again, but this report, again, where is it located? So if members of the public want to see, or
it should be on our website in our clearinghouse of all of our publications.
Yeah, we have all our publications at www.sandag.org/CJ. And it should have gone out to everybody on our mailing list and to people who are on the board also. But if you haven't gotten it, we'd be happy to send it to you.
Great, thank you. Again, just a reminder, so because there is such really rich information and we don't want your work to go unnoticed. I think anytime we can get it in the hands of our public, we want to do that. So thank you again, Dr. Burke, Ms. Caroline, thank you so much. I don't know if you are a doctor, but I was going to upgrade you to doctor. So.
Just a master's.
Okay. Well, thank you again, everyone. Ms. Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to address us on this item?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
All right, and we just had questions from the Public Safety Committee. Again, this was information only. With that, the next Public Safety Committee meeting is currently scheduled for Friday, April 16th at 1 p.m. We are adjourned.